Hello everyone, and welcome to the third video in the What I'm Sowing from Seed Today series. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Jenna and I am gardening in Midwestern Ohio in Zone 6A with a last spring frost date of approximately May 10th. Today, March 9th, I'm sitting about 9 weeks away from that last spring frost date. Now, my indoor sown items stay pretty much on the same schedule from year to year. But my direct sown items, the things that I'm planting outdoors directly in the garden, that schedule can vary quite a bit this time of year. And it's all dependent on what the weather is doing in any given week. But Mother Nature is giving me a nice little stretch of mild weather right now, so I'm planting. So let's jump in with the items that I'm direct sowing outdoors. First up are leafy greens of all types: arugula, lettuce, spinach, endive, escarole, mustard, and cilantro. If you watched the previous videos, you'll know I also started many of these indoors in February. I like to do this as it gives me a staggered harvest, with the crops I'm direct sowing now producing slightly later than my transplants. I'll also likely do another sowing of these same greens in another couple of weeks. Now, most of these cool season greens will germinate in soil temperatures as low as 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, that's not optimal, and it will take them quite a bit longer to germinate in cool soils versus those that are more around that optimal 60 to 70 degree mark. But as I talked about in the last video, it's important in growing areas with suboptimal spring growing conditions to get these crops in and harvested before the heat of summer hits. And planting early helps me do that. Now, pre-germinating seed is one of my favorite ways to give these seeds a jump start even in cool soil conditions. In particular, I like to pre-germinate my pea seeds. Peas love growing in mild, cool spring weather, but don't love germinating in cold soil. In fact, large, relatively soft pea seeds can be prone to rot in cool, damp spring soil. Pre-germinating seed helps a lot with this. So if I'm going to plant in early March, I either pre-germinate or start a batch of seed indoors and transplant, or both. This year, I'm starting the pre-germination process today, and I'll plant these out in about 4 or 5 days. I'm also direct sowing my blue diadem Bachelor's buttons. I typically get some volunteer Bachelor's buttons in my garden every year. So I simply watch for the volunteers to pop up as an indicator for when to sow. These are some of my earliest blooming flowers and are extremely cold hardy, and the bees love them. Now, I know it can be a bit daunting to plant this early, especially when we know here in Ohio and in other similar growing climates that the weather is going to take a turn for the worst again. Freezing rain, snow, freezing nighttime temperatures, these are all still in the forecast for at least the next 2 months. But many of these crops can handle temperatures down into the 20s. Now, for more on information about the low temperatures that these crops can handle, as well as ways to protect them from freezing temperatures, check out this video. And a final direct sowing that I am doing today is a mixed cool season cover crop. This is a mix that contains cold hardy cover such as winter triticale, Austrian winter peas, oats, vetch, and crimson clover. Now, with this row that I'm sowing in cover crop today, I will most likely keep this in cover until about early July, at which point I'll terminate and prep this for my fall crops. Now for the seeds I'm starting indoors today. First up are a couple of herbs. I'm sowing my marjoram, oregano, Mexican mint marigold, and winter thyme. With the exception of the Mexican mint marigold, these all have teeny tiny seeds, which I just sprinkle on the surface of my planting medium and spritz with water. Next up, one of my favorite veggies to grow. This is bulb fennel. I typically start seed indoors in the first 2 weeks of March. Fennel is not as cold hardy as some of my other cool season crops, but also don't do well in the heat, so timing is crucial for success. Also, if you're in a similar climate and a similar latitude to me here in Ohio, look for day neutral or intermediate day varieties. These have been bred to be less sensitive to day length and resistant to bolting. True Italian Florence fennel types have a tendency to bolt in less than ideal conditions and aren't a good match for my growing conditions here. I personally plant the variety Dragon every year. I'm also starting eggplants and peppers today. I generally aim to start peppers and eggplants somewhere between the 7th and the 15th of March. Now, I rarely use heat mats anymore since the area where I start my seeds is plenty warm enough, but peppers and eggplants are the exception. I always use heat mats with these two crops as it does help to hasten seed germination. Now, I know some folks in my area start peppers even earlier, often as early as February. And if you're growing peppers with a particularly long maturity window, so this is often going to be some of your bacatum types or chinensis types, this is a great idea. But because most of what I'm growing are just the straight annum types or early maturing bacatums, I find that this mid-March date works just fine for me. I also find that hybrid varieties are often much more vigorous in terms of seedling emergence, so they don't take as long to germinate and grow either. Today, I'm also starting two types of annual flowers. My Cherry Jolt Dianthus, which is a more heat-tolerant interspecific cross, and Big Blue Salvia. Both of these flowers are butterfly and hummingbird magnets. And finally, I'm seeding two perennial crops today. First up is my Erasmus asparagus. I could have and should have probably started this in February, but I'll still have plugs sized up for a mid to late summer planting. Now, I used to work on a research farm, and one year we did a comparison planting where we planted out seed-grown plugs of asparagus versus one-year crowns. And that year I decided that I was never planting asparagus crowns again. The performance of both were very, very similar. We ended up waiting the same number of years to harvest from both of those groups, and the seed-grown plugs are just so much easier to plant. If you've ever planted asparagus crowns, you know they have those big masses of roots, and you dig a big old trench, and it's a project. Whereas the plugs, you know, you're planting a small little, like I think these were 50 cell plugs that we were using. It's much, much easier. Now, the variety that I'm planting today, Erasmus, is, as far as I know, only available currently as seed, and it is a really nice purple all-male hybrid. Now, that was another thing I learned from that planting test is asparagus is surprisingly easy to grow from seed. It really requires no extra attention or care, other than just remembering to start it a little bit early. It's as simple as just popping those seeds in the seed starting mix, putting them under grow lights or out in the greenhouse, and then just remembering to water and feed it periodically until those plugs have filled out enough roots to be transplanted, and that's it. I'm also starting some strawberries from seed today, specifically the variety Elan. It's a day-neutral, ever-bearing type, which bears in its first year. It's about 100 to 120 days to maturity, so starting it from seed now should give me fruit starting at about the middle of the summer, and because it's an ever-bearing variety, it should bear up until the frost. Now, I know many growers grow this variety specifically on an annual production schedule, so just doing a one-year planting and then it gets ripped out and replanted the following year. But I'm going to leave it in the garden and see how it produces for me in subsequent years. But at any rate, I'm really excited to get a harvest this first year. And if any of you have grown Elan in your own gardens, drop a line in the comments below and let me know what you thought of it. So that wraps up everything I am sowing today for my Ohio garden. If you'd like to follow along for the rest of the season with my sowing and transplanting dates, be sure to subscribe to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.